everyone. Thank you very much for being with us here today, both the witnesses as well as the members of Parliament. I would like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 18 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.2 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, April 8, 2022, the committee is meeting to study small and medium enterprises within a study on competition. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid form pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. We have Mr. Fillmore and Mr. Massey who are here in person. So hello. For those of you who are here in Ottawa, you know the rules. So please govern yourselves in confidence, in consequence. So for our witnesses, I would like to thank them for being here. From the Department of Employment and Social Development, we have Chris Bates, Director General, Apprenticeships and Sectoral Initiatives Director. Hello, Mr. Bates. We have Helen Smiley, Director General, Strategic Integration and Corporate Affairs Directorate. Hello, Madam Smiley. And from the Department of Industry, we have Cheryl Kronwig, Director General, Advanced Manufacturing and Industrial Strategic Brands. Etienne René Massé, Director General, Small Business Branch. Martin Simard, Senior Director, Corporate Insolvency and Competition Policy, Marketplace Framework Policy. Those are our witnesses for the first hour. So thank you all for your work and thank you for coming to this committee. So without further ado, for 6 minutes, I would like to give the floor to either Mr. Bates or Madam Smiley.
Said we're actually going to start, if that's okay.
Fine by me. So we'll go with Mr. Massey.
Bonjour et bon après-midi.
Hello to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in your committee's study of Canada's small and medium businesses. Small businesses are key to our commodities and main streets. They employ millions of Canadians and help drive economic growth. At the heart of all small businesses are entrepreneurs who work day in and day out to offer services and goods to Canadians and international markets. Small businesses and entrepreneurs are problem solvers working daily to confront a range of challenges, from those that impact daily operations to those that have medium and long-term implication for their businesses. These include talent shortages, supply chain constraints, inflation pressures, infrastructure challenges, and adjusting to climate change. The pandemic brought on a range of new challenges and further amplified others. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the government has made essential investments to support Canadian small enterprises to address these ongoing challenges and to provide a bridge to post-pandemic recovery. These many emergency supports provided throughout the pandemic have enabled many companies to pivot, adapt, and keep operating.
The country has improved in many cases, and the government's recovery plan is shifting from broad-based support to more targeted growth initiatives. Budget 2022 provides a range of incentives to encourage investments in growing businesses. This includes steps to build more resilient supply chains, to cut taxes for Canada's small businesses, and to drive the creation and ensure the protection of Canadian intellectual property. The budget will also help Canadian businesses make the most of global trade opportunities while better protecting them against unfair competition. To promote a competitive marketplace for Canadian consumers and businesses, the budget also announced the government's intention to introduce legislative amendments to the Competition Act as a preliminary phase in modernizing the competition regime. This will include fixing loopholes, tackling practices harmful to workers and customers, modernizing access to justice and penalties, and adapting the laws to today's digital reality. The government will continue to consult broadly on the role and functioning of the Competition Act and its enforcement regime. With respect to supply chains, as one of the world's leading economies and trading nation, Canada relies on strong supply chains to support the competitiveness of Canadian companies and the quality of life of everyday Canadians. However, their global and interlinked nature makes them vulnerable to an array of risks. As we all know, supply chains around the world have come under unprecedented strain. Firms from across the world are experiencing demand uncertainty, unprecedented supply and logistical delays, and significant operation stoppages due to the unavailability of inputs. Some of the challenges we now face were present before the onset of the pandemic. More recently, disruptions like the invasion of Ukraine, labor issues in the rail sector, protests at border crossings, and natural disasters such as floods and forest fires further illustrate that we must all fully appreciate our heightened vulnerability to a myriad of risks. The government is committed to strengthening the country's supply chains to enhance the timely movement of goods and materials while building a more resilient economy. We understand that the current supply chains issues will have an impact in all sectors of the economy and affect Canadians in their everyday lives. The government is working closely with the United States and global partners to enhance supply chain security for key commodities. This includes industries such as critical minerals, batteries and semiconductors, as well as life sciences, manufacturing, transportation, and the defense sectors. Inflation is another global issue which businesses are confronting in the post-pandemic recovery. Initially, it was due to global oil shortages, pandemic supply chain problems, and the way the virus changed spending habits. However, we also know that the inflation is getting further exacerbated by Russia's war in Ukraine. In addition to tackling broad-based economic challenges, the government is also working to enable all entrepreneurs to advance their ventures. To address barriers confronted by women, the government invested in the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy. Budget 2021 invested a further $141 million to provide greater access for capital for women starting their business ventures and further support business support organizations that help women entrepreneurs. The Women Entrepreneurship Strategy has already helped thousands of women grow and start their business. The government is also investing to remove systemic barriers faced by Black entrepreneurs and business owners through the Black Entrepreneurship Program, which was developed with Black entrepreneurs for Black entrepreneurs to address the systemic inequalities they have faced for far too long. Indigenous-led businesses also confront a range of challenges which can be amplified given their rural and remote settings. Through Budget 2021, the government expanded the Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program with an investment of $42 million. The National Aboriginal Capital Corporation Association also launched its $150 million Indigenous Growth Fund alongside BDC and other government partners to help Indigenous small businesses attract investment and take on more ambitious projects. Enfin, pour aider toutes les entreprises à accroître leur...
Finally, to help all business increase their competitiveness and access to new market, the government recently launched the Canada Digital Adoption Program. This program is a key driver of growth for many businesses, including those in rural Canada. It will help them access new customers in their communities, across Canada, and reach the global marketplace around the world. Under this program, Canadian SMEs will be able to assess their digital readiness and apply for grants and loans online. Depending on their size, specific needs, and goals, businesses can apply for funding through the Grow Your Business Online or Boost Your Business technology streams. Through these initiatives and many more focused on innovation, ISED is working to support small businesses. Thank you very much for allowing us to present before you today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Massey. And now we'll give the floor to Mr. Bates.
Chair and committee members, I'm pleased to join you today to provide an overview of labor and skill shortages in the Canadian economy. Labor market pressures are affecting practically all sectors of the economy and regions of the country. As of January 2022, there were more than 800,000 job vacancies across Canada, which is still significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels. 62% of current vacancies are in jobs that require high school or less. Many of these vacancies are expected to be cyclical and filled in a post-COVID economy. For instance, the number of vacancies in accommodation and food services is now half of what it was last summer. Other shortages are a result of structural factors, such as an aging population and rising skill requirements. This is increasing job vacancies in key sectors such as construction and professional, scientific, and technical services, as well as healthcare. These vacancies will take longer to fill given the scarcity of highly skilled workers among unemployed and the need for specialized training. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, were severely impacted by the pandemic and recorded the largest decline in the number of employees in spring 2020. Automation, digital innovation, and a transition to a low-carbon economy are also driving key shifts that present opportunities for all Canadians. The need for skills, including digital skills, to support the changing economy have never been so strong. For example, jobs to support the low-carbon economy are expected to increase at 3 times the rate of total employment. There are 3 potential sources of labor supply in Canada. 1, new entrants to the labor market, which are primarily youth and immigrants. 2, groups underrepresented in the labor market. And 3, individuals already working who need upskilling and reskilling to adapt and stay in the labor force. To address labor shortages facing the Canadian economy, it will be necessary to maximize all 3 sources of labor. Youth are the biggest source of new entrants to the labor market, with 4.9 million young job seekers expected to enter the workforce by 2028. The next source of labor market supply is from immigration. However, accessing the supply of labor will require addressing barriers many newcomers face to securing jobs, including English or French proficiency, difficulties obtaining recognition of their credentials, and a lack of Canadian work experience. While temporary foreign workers will play a critical role in filling jobs in the agriculture, food, and fish processing sectors, in fact, 80% are working in agriculture, it is important to underscore that they make up only 0.4% of the labor force. Another source of supply is underrepresented groups. Increasing the participation rate of women, Indigenous people, persons with disability, and visible minorities in the workforce could add over 2 million new workers to the labor market. Finally, 3/4 of the labor force of 2028 is already working. This is critical context, as labor shortages are not purely a numbers issue, but also a skills mismatch or skills shortage issue. As the skills required for jobs continues to rise with the introduction of new technologies, most workers will need to upgrade their skills. As some jobs disappear, it will be important for workers to have access to training to upskill and reskill so that they can fill new and emerging opportunities in other sectors. To this end, the Government of Canada has taken concrete measures to help reduce shortages and support SMEs. To help ensure employers can quickly bring in workers to fill short-term labor market gaps, Budget 2022 proposes to introduce a trusted employer model to reduce red tape for employers hiring temporary foreign workers with 29.3 million, a new foreign labor program for fish and agriculture at 48.2 million, improvements to the employer inspections at 14.6 million, and increased capacities for processing employer applications with 64.6 million. Budget 2022 also allocates $115 million over 5 years, with $30 million going to expand with $30 million annually to expand the Foreign Credential Recognition Program and help up to 11,000 skilled newcomers, including internationally trained healthcare professionals per year, get their credentials recognized and find work in their field. We will continue working collaboratively with our federal partners and counterparts in provincial and territorial governments to help alleviate current and future labor market pressures. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bates.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bates. That's very much appreciated. We're going to now move ahead to the first round of questions. Mr. Massey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I'd like to go to Mr. Massey at ISED Small Business Branch first. In early 2015, the former government passed the Red Tape Reduction Act, and this was the one-for-one law. And so for accountability, there was an annual scorecard report that was made public to demonstrate results to businesses with ratings by department. Yet the most recent scorecard I can find is from 2016. Is this... Where are these ratings? Where are these ratings now being published?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. The Treasury Board Secretariat has the lead for the red tape reduction exercise across government, and all departments do participate in ongoing work with the Treasury Board to explore regulatory and administrative burden questions. I don't have the immediate answer on where the next reports are. I would encourage you, as part of the study, you may wish to speak with the Treasury Board Secretariat officials on that front. I do know that for ISED, we do have a regular the administrative burden count, and we do conduct that on an annual basis. And for 2021, the overall count for ISED was 3,582, representing a decrease from the 3,638 that we had in 2020.
Thank you. Now, I know that this study that we're doing today is on regulatory. There's 5 different sections, and 2 of them include competitiveness and regulatory requirements and bureaucracy. So can you table the scorecards from 2016 to 2022 for the committee? Can you report back to the committee on that?
Unfortunately, ISED does not control the scorecards. Those are controlled by the Treasury Board Secretariat. So we can definitely indicate your interest to the Treasury Board Secretariat, but I can't sort of commit to that from ISED's part.
Okay, well, what about your department then? Would you be able to table strictly for your department? At the minimum, we have 5 senior government officials here today, all of which are director generals representing 2 departments. So at the minimum, we should be able to have those departments tabled today, or future date as soon as possible.
Yeah, so I can commit for ISED to follow up on where our administrative burden counts are and our regulatory pieces, yes.
Okay, and just so that I'm clear, I'm referring to the scorecard because there's different categories. For example, full compliance, significant compliance, inadequate compliance. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that we're looking for the scorecard that isn't public. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
One of the other parts of this is now we know that there's the minister's annual report that is tabled. It does have some information in it, but one of the other parts that doesn't seem to be online is the Regulatory Advisory Committee. So can you? And these are appointed by the government with reps from small and large businesses, and to review the government's annual work in reducing red tape. So again, the last membership that I can find is going back to 2015 online. Is this committee still in place?
Thank you for the question. I would have to check in with colleagues at Treasury Board Secretariat who are responsible for the Secretariat for that committee to see if that committee is still in place. We can definitely come back to the committee and give you a table if the committee is still in place and the current membership.
Well, and I guess the question would be, why would the committee still not be in place? So were you informed that the committee wasn't being formed at some point? Because it looks like the former members of the committee would have worked really closely with your department or related departments because of the type of work that they were doing. So did you ever receive notification that the committee wasn't operating any longer?
I unfortunately can't recall offhand if that was communicated to me. I'd have to go back internally and talk to colleagues in the department who work more closely on this file.
Okay. As part of that as well, again, because of the what we're actually studying here today, do you have any information on the regulations which were exempted as part of this? If there were changes that were made to the act, and if there were regulations that might have been exempted, that might have made some changes at some point to what was made public.
And thanks for the question. Unfortunately, not to. Again, the Treasury Board Secretariat is the lead for administrative regulatory burden review for the Government of Canada. So we would have to check in with those colleagues, or you may wish to invite them at a future committee appearance as well.
Okay, well, again, this is, 2 points that are actually part of this study are what we're discussing here today, and it's unfortunate that we have 5 officials here that can't answer about this. So I'll go just down a different line of questioning here regarding removing interprovincial trade. Now, I know that we have the Canada Free Trade Agreement. There is the Regulatory Reconciliation and Cooperation Table that has targets to reduce interprovincial trade barriers. Is that being kept up to date? And can you table with the committee broken down by year and section in the table whether trade barriers are removed, what the progress is? Because we haven't had an update on that.
So I will see. I'm just going to check with Martin to see if you have anything on this one from the competition side. No. If not, I think we'll have to go back to our colleagues and provide look at the question and sort of see what we can provide to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Gray. That's all time, and you're always, as you know, Mr. Massey, always free to table documents for further reference for the committee to answer questions asked by members. So thank you, Madam Gray. Thank you, Mr. Massey, and we'll now move to Mr. Gahir for 6 minutes.
Great, thank you, Chair. My first question is for Mr. Bates. So you mentioned language and credential requirements for immigrants and the barriers that they face. Could you expand a little bit on the Foreign Credential Recognition Program, what that entails, what it looks like, and possibly how it'll protect against fraud? Because I'm aware of cases that involve online degrees or fake transcripts. So just a little bit of expanding on that.
Absolutely. So thank you for the question. So as I indicated, there were new investments in the Foreign Credential Recognition Program. It a bit more than doubles the program over the next couple of years, ramping up once we fully implement it. Part of what we focus on with the program is a few things. It's number one, getting skilled newcomers work experience right away in their occupation. Number two, looking at regulatory changes and supports to actually facilitate getting their credentials recognized. And maybe I'll just pause there to also answer your other question is with regards to fraud. So looking after that is a PT area of jurisdiction that's often further delegated down to the regulators. And that's part of the work that they actually do is ensure, through follow-ups, through looking at their credentials, through tests and so forth, to make sure that people actually have the skills that they studied. And then the last thing I'll just point out on the Foreign Credential Program as well is that we provide things like we offer loans and support services to help skilled newcomers cover the costs of their credential recognition process.
Great, thank you so much for that. My second question is for Mr. Massey. So you talked about addressing the barriers that businesses can often face. So we had a roundtable discussion with Minister Tassi recently, and one of the with small businesses from Mississauga, and one of the common themes that came out was that businesses had a hard time figuring out what government programs are there, and then navigating those programs, the applications for those programs. Could you speak a little bit about if there's anything more that the government can do to make government programs that are already existing more accessible to small businesses? And these businesses often don't have the infrastructure to navigate long applications that big corporations do.
Yes, thank you for your question. So the government has made a few investments through a few different approaches to help businesses access or get information and then work towards accessing programs. So I would draw your attention to the Canada Business app, which is a sort of an application designed for small businesses and owners to help them navigate through the different government programs and services that are there. There's also the Canada Business Benefit Finder, which is a website that organizations and businesses can go to, enter some key details about their organization, their business, and the types of support they're looking, and then they will get a roster of supports that will be provided to them. And those supports are not only from ISED, they're from across the federal government, and we also work with provinces and territories to sort of include those services. And the last piece is that I would mention is the Canada Business app, which consolidates information on licensing and requirements across jurisdictions in one place. So for anyone opening a new business, it's a great tool that they can access to get information. And the last piece I would say is that in the design of calls for proposals, depending on the target audience, and when we go down closer to smaller businesses that are on our main streets, we do look at the criteria and how we develop our guides and our application forms to try to find ways to make them as common sense and clear as we can to help those small businesses that, as you say, do not have the resources and time to commit to do that among all the other challenges and problem solving that they're doing daily.
Great, thank you for that answer. Very informative. My last question is open to either of you. It's a bit of a pivot. And the government has cited modernization and reform of the Competition Act as a way to promote growth and affordability. what specific measures in the Competition Act are currently being considered?
Thank you for the question. So the government has decided to proceed in kind of a two-step process. So in the mandate letter, the Minister the Minister of Industry was tasked with doing a comprehensive review of competition policy. And in the budget that was just released a couple of weeks ago, it committed to do this in two phases. So first, down payment of legislative amendments that Etienne gave a preview in his opening remarks. So these would include fixing loopholes in the law, tackling wage fixing and pricing more directly, modernizing access to justice and the tax penalty regime, and better adapting the law to today's digital reality. And then following that, the budget says that this is to be followed by a broader, more comprehensive review of the Act, where I think we will be looking at potentially more structural or fundamental changes.
Great, thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Gaillard. Monsieur Simard, je passerai la parole.
Thank you. Now, thank you, Mr. Simard. Now we'll have 6 minutes with Mr. Lemire. Thank you. My question is for Mr. Bates. First of all, thank you very much for your testimony and being here today. I would like to hear I'd like to hear about the issue of making sure that the businesses have access to skilled workers. Quebec is responsible for labor, and they have a labor ecosystem with the government of Quebec, with the Department of Labor, with other organizations, and with the businesses and the Federation of Chambers of Commerce as well. And so they now analyze the needs and set up policy. They have sectoral committees, the government of Quebec and the association, sectoral association, to try to determine the needs of future and present to see how they will be able to fill those needs. In Quebec, our ecosystem produces all of the studies necessary to determine the labor needs. So I think that the market impact study is something that's unneeded. Was this Quebec ecosystem, would it be better if we were able to bring the foreign worker to Quebec, because that is something that is more connected to labor rather than immigration? And what about the impacts on the EMP in Quebec? What about those studies?
For the question. So we have launched recently the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program, which does look at how we support broader labor market context. The program really tries to be national in scope, looking at how we support economies of scale with small and medium-sized enterprises, how we can develop common tools or curriculum that could be used across jurisdictions to support workers. We also look at other things. How do we successfully support employers and workers to make the transition to a low-carbon economy, to equip through economies of scale, best practices, so forth, the workers, so that we're prepared to meet the needs of workers for the low carbon economy.
We have a great need. There's a labor shortage, and this is in my region the case, and we have had this problem for a while. So what I'm seeing on your internet site with respect to the impact evaluation, it takes 53 days. That's 3 months. Those are delays that add to the risks that a business owner has when they want to look internationally. So we feel, based on the meetings I've had from these business owners, we're talking about investments of $10,000, $15 for even just one foreign worker, which is a risk, and there are no guarantees. The labor impact study is another delay, and this study is something that creates another delay. And so if you have a position that's available, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in the food service industry, there are not people are not there, and this is a problem. It's really a huge issue, and so that adds time, it adds delays. And in terms of francophones, it would seem that there's a labor shortage within the department that is supposed to be producing these impact studies. So this is a question of delay. It's important. So if you're not able to produce these studies in the delay that you're saying on your website, what alternatives is there for businesses? Because we have seen cases where their applications were refused because they didn't get their impact study in time. So what is the situation with respect to services that are given to businesses right now?
So thank you for the question. We would have to get back to you with more information from our colleagues, but that's part of why we made new investments to facilitate and expedite some of these processes so that there are reduced times for employers and for workers as well.
Je suis content de l'entendre.
I am happy to hear that. For the temporary foreign worker program, does that correspond to the need of the businesses right now? Has there been a reflection to that effect? And what kind of adjustments would you be ready to make?
So again, I think we would have to get back to you with some additional information on the temporary foreign worker program. Part of what we're doing through the other suite of skill investments that we're doing is to the extent possible, prepare Canadians to meet the employment and skills demands that we have in the labor market, and to support employers to be more productive and fully meet their goals as well.
Je suis prêt.
I'm concerned within this ecosystem that I was talking about, the idea of having a better presence within the regions for government services. How could we have better coverage, and how could that help businesses for the regional economic development? What role could you play? A role that would be complementary and useful under the circumstances? Would there be at least some communication that could be done with the different people that work in the Quebec labor market right now?
So we are meeting with our colleagues in Quebec. We are meeting with, in fact, all our federal, provincial, territorial colleagues to discuss new measures that were in the budget, how to make sure that we're as complementary as possible. And as we roll these out, we're trying to look at best practices, for example, in different jurisdictions, to not reinvent the wheel, to allow those to be utilized in other jurisdictions as well. So we are communicating, we are making sure that to the extent possible, we don't duplicate and that we complement existing programs.
Merci, Monsieur Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Bates.
To Mr. Moss for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses to be here. First question I'd like to ask is with regards to border communities. What special programs are there any for border communities? The pandemic was obviously and continues to plague border communities. Now we have passport delays, for example, but that's for the exodus of business and respect to tourism, but it's not returning for us in many sectors here. What can you say or highlight, or what is the plans to deal with that? Because there was winners and losers with the depends on the industry you are, but tourism has really been hit hard, and we'll have another difficult summer. So what can you provide for small, medium-sized businesses for the tourism sector and other border communities that, like for mine, for example, we're on a peninsula. We just, had to basically grin and bear it all those years, and now it's a little bit open, but it's still a challenge to get those people back.
So thank you for the question. So you are right that the tourism industry was the first impacted and will probably have one of the longest recoveries as we come out of the pandemic. The government has invested to sort of help the tourism industry through the Tourism Recovery Fund, and through the pandemic, there was also the regional development agencies implemented the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, the RRF, that was able to be there to help industries. There is, we all hope that this summer will be better, and I think the government will continue to sort of engage with the tourism sector. I know the tourism sector officials in the department have regular engagement with the tourism sector to better understand the needs and the demands and pressures, and look and explore at what government programs can be there to help.
Has there been any work done with regards to advertising to Americans in outreach for Arrive Can and new border processes? When the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative was brought in, requiring Americans to have passports and Canadians back and forth, it created a different changeable border culture, and it took a lot of advertising, and not only do businesses were doing it to educate the other sides back and forth. Is that going to happen here? I haven't seen anything whatsoever, and that's a little bit of a concern of mine. Even when we brought in marijuana in Canada here, Riding Like Mine got at least an educational flyer because we did public awareness to make sure people weren't going to be accidentally bringing it across the border and clogging it up by accident and having all kinds of problems. What's being done to work on, especially the seniors, snowbirds, and so forth, to educate and get people ready to use the new app system that's been put in place? Is there anything being planned for this summer? Because that's something we can control, is reaching that out.
So thank you for the question. I do know that the tourism industry has relayed the concern to us about the Arrive app and the need to make sure that people understand and are aware of it. We are working with our tourism partners to see how we can sort of get that message out more broadly. And I do know that through Destination Canada, which is the Crown corporation responsible for destination marketing to Canada, that they have a range of advertising. They do campaigns, so we can follow up with them to see if they are planning to do anything more targeted with regards to arrival and border crossings. And I do know that our colleagues at CBSA are also doing information and communication and awareness raising on that front as well.
That's good to hear, and I would appreciate that because I was just at the Windsor-Detroit border again. It's just very close to where I'm at. My poor colleagues at committee heard this many times to nausea about that. But I was just there with the minister and the CBSA officers that are doing, like, they've had so many changes, and there's some new things that are happening. But even if we're able to educate even our citizen seniors, in particular, persons with disabilities, they're having more trouble on that. And I'm just not sure if we're reaching enough out to snowbirds or associations and so forth, because even if we have Americans that are having a little bit of trouble with this, if we're doing better on it, it means less border backups and more efficiency. So I just ask for a review of that, because it's really worthwhile. When we advertised for WHTI into the United States, it really helped a lot. It just unplugs things. So I'd ask that. If I have a little bit of time left, Mr. Chair, do I have any time left?
You have about a minute, Mr. Moss.
Okay, so I'll go quickly to Mr. Bates then. Just with regards to fraud, this committee actually did do a study on fraud, and the effects on small business was one of the things. Is there anything new happening with regards to that and protecting small, medium-sized businesses from fraud? There's a lot of targeting, especially new Canadians and new Canadians with English as a second language. Just wondering if there's anything in there for that. I know it's a little bit more specific, but it is an interest of mine.
Yes, thanks. Thank you for the question. I'm unable to answer that question. It's a bit outside of the scope of ESDC's responsibilities with regards to fraud and SMEs.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mr. Williams for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions will be to Mr. Bates on the Canada skilled labor shortage. Are you aware of a number of what the labor shortage is costing the economy right now? Have you seen reports on that, or is your department aware of that?
Yes, there are many reports out there on the cost of it. Yes.
Okay. Do you have any numbers? Or are you aware of any numbers?
I do not have numbers in front of me. We've looked at a number of studies that have had some pretty significant numbers that have been released by different groups, such as the Chamber of Commerce and so forth.
Okay. If you had any, just like any other questions I'll ask today, can you just please submit them to committee if you can? You talked about some barriers to language training to being one of the holdbacks for immigration, skilled immigrants to the country. Do you have a number of how many skilled immigrants right now are waiting to do language training or testing at this point?
So thank you for the question. From an ESDC perspective, we're more on the credential recognition side. Those types of questions would have to be directed at IRCC they take care of the language training component.
No problem. I'm just going to stick then to where you see barriers. Are there streamlining processes you can recommend that would help alleviate that? I know you've talked about some other barriers, but I've heard a number as high as 1.8 million that we're waiting for language training. Are there recommendations you can submit to the committee on how we can streamline that and make that quicker?
So I think we are looking at barriers as a whole. So we know there's systemic barriers, there's work experience barriers, there's language barriers. We could submit to the committee some of the key barriers that we have, and that's why we're investing over $100 million in new money in the Foreign Credential Recognition Program to help alleviate those barriers and make sure that we utilize skilled newcomers to their full potential.
Okay, you talked about youth, which was 4.9 million by 2028. Seniors account for 18% of Canada's population now and will be 1/5 of Canada's population by 2025. And seniors are going to be the biggest, they call it the gray resignation. Have you heard of that? And how many seniors do you think by 2028 are you seeing come out of the workforce as much as we have youth coming into it?
So thank you for the question. I don't have details on the numbers. I know that we are looking at all areas of potential to contribute to the skills and talent and labor market shortages that we have, especially when you look at the potential for part-time. How do we leverage all the knowledge and expertise that more experienced worker, how do we leverage that to train the younger generation? So we've launched, we have different initiatives in place, more project-based, that we look at, whether it's mentorship, but as a whole, I think we need to look at all areas of participants in the economy.
And I agree. I think you had youth and you had ones who aren't participating. But the seniors one, from the reports I've read, will be 7.6 million retiring by 2028. Does that sound in the ballpark? When we have about 4.9 youth coming in. So seems like is there going to be a gap from seniors to youth coming in from the first part that you identified for labor?
Well, yes, as we have an aging society, we know that as they leave, there will be gaps in the labor market as a result of just pure demographics.
Okay. Do you have any data on the participation rate? Is the participation rate in Canada dropping for the labor market?
Sorry, with particular to seniors or in general?
Well, so when we see unemployment rates drop, but the participation rate, so those that are willing to enable to go look for a job, are we aware of those statistics, and are they dropping as well, or are they increasing?
I'm sorry that I don't have those stats on me.
You can send those to the committee. That would be fantastic, sir. And last question, I'm going to talk about one issue in specific on skilled labor for small business would be home builders. We know right now we need to build 1.8 million new homes just to start to solve the housing process. In my region, we have an incredible skilled labor shortage. Is there an emphasis from the government right now to look at skilled labor shortages in home building? So plumbers, electricians, framers, is there an emphasis there to start filling those skilled trades?
So thank you for the question. Yes, there is an emphasis. As I mentioned previously, the government is in the budget 2021, there was $470 million that's being invested over 3 years in a new apprenticeship service to help SMEs onboard and hire first-year apprentices. So they can receive up to $5,000 for the first apprentice they hire, and then an additional $5,000 if they hire from an equity deserving group. Also, there was a doubling of the union training and innovation program to $50 million annually. So looking at that, it's all about apprenticeship in the construction trade. So plumbers, welders, pipe fitters, carpenters, etc. And all those initiatives are aimed at supporting more apprentices to help do things like build homes.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Erskine-Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
I want to start, Mr. Bates. You had indicated there are hundreds of thousands of job vacancies. I also understand, though, that there are over 1 million jobless workers who say they want to work. And when you identify the job vacancies, you have different categories, but the largest category is low-wage work. And you're familiar with the April 4th announcement from Employment and Social Development Canada related to the expansion of the TFW program? I assume you're familiar with it?
Yes.
So I guess my question is, and I'd echo, there's a professor, Scooterud, from the University of Waterloo, and he asked this question, which I'd echo. We expect workers to compete for scarce jobs when labor markets are slack. Why don't we expect businesses to compete for scarce workers when markets are tight?
So I think that's part of what we're trying to do through programs like the Sectoral Workforce Solutions programs, is to empower and enable employers to do more. So just again, a concrete example, if we're making a transition to a low carbon economy, do employers know all the details of what the changes are, how it's going to happen? So part of what we're trying to do there is develop tools, curriculum, other supports that can actually facilitate these investments by employers, so that we can actually be leaders in the areas of the new economy.
Can I ask with reference to the United States, because the U.S., they're struggling with inflation as we are in Canada, but they've also seen a market increase in wages for low-income workers, and we haven't seen that same increase. And don't you think an expansion of the TFW program in particular, I'm not talking about the global skills strategy, I'm not talking about addressing specific high skills gaps, but when you've got over 1 million unemployed Canadians who say they want to work, why are we expanding the TFW program, which, put it bluntly, isn't that going to suppress low-income wage growth, contrary to what's happening in the U.S.?
So thank you for the question. We would have to get our TFW colleagues to answer that. Part of really what
I appreciate that. And actually, that's probably fairest. If you can have your colleagues with greater knowledge and expertise in that space provide an answer to that question in writing, that would be appreciated.
Yeah.
Related, and you've mentioned a couple of times an emphasis on recognition of foreign credentials. It's incredibly important. I'm glad to see the government address that particular problem. I've engaged in the past with the National Dental Examining Board of Canada. Due to the pandemic, as an example, there's been a backlog of tests. Tests have been canceled, have to be rescheduled. There's a backlog of not recognizing foreign credentials per se, but ensuring that the tests are in place, that there's a whole swath of people who are ready to work in Canada, and it's the testing system that is getting in the way. As a result, when you look at that $100 million and how it can be best allocated, are you in conversations specifically relating to testing capacity and ensuring that people who are ready to enter the workforce, once they get through those tests, that we're expediting that process?
Thank you for the question. So the short answer is yes, we are looking at that. That's one of the key areas that we're doing, because it's a barrier to getting new entrants into the field and in an expeditious manner. So we're looking at structural initiatives. How do we simplify some of the testing procedures? How do you expedite it? And how do you make it more seamless for the client?
And when we look at, and I'll move to ISED for a second, because there's a list of programs that were identified, the Indigenous Growth Fund, the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund. Now, there's a growth, and I think you were describing them as investments, and there's a growth metric that we ought to be concerned about, but there's also an equity metric that we ought to be concerned about. So in relation to these programs, how do we measure success?
Thanks for the question. So we are actively investing in a range of programs. I think how we measure success is that we look at the number of entrepreneurs that have been supported. We look at how long the longevity of the businesses that are supported, and how much employment they create. And because that's sort of the economic spin-off.
For a moment, every MP likes the Canada Summer Jobs Program because money comes directly into our riding. But I always worry about it because we count jobs at 8 weeks. And I'd prefer one job for 16 weeks versus 2 jobs for 8 weeks. But the government likes to count more jobs, and so they prefer jobs at 8 weeks. So when you say measuring jobs, are we careful about the way we measure them?
So when we support a business, we look to see how many jobs have been created on that front, or how many employees they have. We sometimes have metrics to see how long those the tenure of the job is. Sometimes we also look we can look sort of a little, like if we invest in 2020, we can look down the road 2 years, 3 years, and see if there has been jobs that have been created and maintained over the course.
I'm out of time, so in writing, if you could provide examples of how we're addressing supply chain issues in the sectors that you specified in your opening remarks, just a list of some examples would be really helpful for this committee, and thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Merci, Monsieur Lemire.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire. 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. You know that for us, when we were in the election campaigns, the government promising jobs are not very credible. So we really do need to be able to have jobs to keep the economy going. But I would like to talk about the 14th of April employment and Mr. Bates Employment Development Canada, the plan for labour for the temporary workers in Canada. We're going to be able to cover labour shortages in Canada. It was mentioned the government would be ready to set up the implementation of policies to take into consideration true shortages without replacing Canadian workers. So my question is simple. What would be a false labour shortage in a context?
We're looking at all kinds of solutions. There is no one solution to the labor shortages that we have. That's why we need a suite of programs, including those from supporting those who are in the labor market now, looking at the next generation, as well as looking for outside of the country where we can bring talent and skills into the labor market as well.
It was mentioned in the same communication that you will be setting them up measures to be able to accelerate processing of the applications in the context. I think the way to accelerate is for the temporary foreign workers. Maybe we need to be able to, what obstacles would you like to eliminate on your side to be able to accelerate the processing of temporary foreign workers?
Thank you for the question. So we'll have to get written communication follow-up to that question.
La période de validité.
The studies for a labor market is going to go from 9 to 18 months, and it was 6 months before the pandemic. Does that mean that it's going to take you even longer to be able to process things? And how is this analysis different when you look at the other Quebec shortages in Quebec?
Unfortunately, we'll have to get somebody to follow up with that question.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much then. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Mr. Massey for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one of the things the temporary foreign workers gives me concern at times is that when there has been some outreach to other Canadians to do some of the work, there hasn't been either transportation provided, there hasn't been the wage for it to be worthwhile in terms of actually commuting. I'm just wondering what type of studies have we done for individuals, say, for example, is mentioned for students and student debt in small and medium-sized businesses and recovering that debt from your education. Have we done any work on that? Because I know I represent a university and college, and I have some people that are opting out of doing some of that because time they get their education in college and university, and then they have that debt, the market doesn't pay back for that for decades. And so some people are leaving skilled trades and other types of positions behind. So what type of studies are we doing in terms of student debt and getting into and paying back that student debt if you go into the small and medium-sized workforce?
So thank you for the question. We'll have to get back to you on the studies themselves, as I'm not familiar with any currently within my portfolio. But we are offering loans, grants to apprentices. So we have the Canada Apprenticeship Loan. We also have numerous grants available to support apprentices that are grants. They don't have to be repaid. And the other thing that we do offer through most of our programs is wraparound supports. So removing barriers to those who want to participate, whether it's transportation costs or childcare costs, et cetera. So those are some of the complementary things that we do through some of our programming.
Maybe this will be good for an example, and I know it'll be real quick here. Could we get back on, I guess, if there are some metrics as to either the loans or the grants and how long it's taking people that have gone through those processes and have taken advantage of that, paying back and getting into the positive. So I want to see whether they're effective or not. My background is an employment specialist for persons with disabilities, and so sometimes what we used to do is measure how long it took to actually pay off the educational component, because that often derives why somebody would even go into the market. So perhaps we can follow that up, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mass. We'll move to Mr. Cram for 5 minutes.
Thank you to all the witnesses for joining us today. Mr. Massey, in one of the earlier lines of questioning, you were asked about the tourism sector, in particular with respect to border communities. Can you elaborate on what are the main challenges facing the tourism sector, particularly near the border?
So I think, thank you for the question. I think the challenges that border communities are facing, or tourism operators in border communities are facing, are similar to many of the challenges that tourism operators are facing. The most pressing concern we hear these days is with regards to the access to people, to employees, to a workforce to be able to fulfill and respond to the demand that they're starting to see increase. The other element that we are hearing from tourism operators is just the fact that for the past 2 years, the revenues have been much lower. They have ongoing carrying costs with regards to investments that they had made into the years going into the pandemic, and trying to continue to carry those costs. I think with regards to border communities, more specifically, Mr. Mass sort of mentioned earlier the application, and making sure that there is awareness of that application, of the app, I should say, for people before they arrive. So I think that's another big concern, making sure that there is awareness of that app for the visitors when they come to the borders, to just smooth the process through the border.
All right, very good. Mr. Bates, you mentioned in your opening statement about foreign credentials, and it's come up a couple of times. I wonder if you could elaborate a bit on my colleague, Mr. Kahir's question about loans to immigrants to get their foreign credentials recognized. How expensive is it for new immigrants to get their foreign credentials recognized, and how long a process is it?
So thank you very much for the question. That is a question that is hard to answer, because it really depends on the occupation. So something like a physician, it might take longer and be more expensive to get their credentials recognized. And it depends on so many factors, like do they have the right paperwork, how quickly the person wants to process it, how responsive they are, but also all the other administrative barriers. The loans, we offer up to $15,000 to help offset some of those costs, because there are costs associated with things like taking exams, as well as they're often new to Canada, and they might not have the revenue, or they might feel they're forced to actually try to get any job to help offset some of these costs. So that's part of why we offer the loans, so that we can support them to actually get their credentials recognized and work in their field of study.
And are most or all of these credentials recognized at the provincial level, or are there federal certifications as well that apply for the program?
So the vast majority are at the provincial level, and they often further delegate that responsibility to regulators in their province. But there are a few exceptions that are federal.
And does the department coordinate at all with foreign countries in terms of post-secondary education and standardizing curriculums and that sort of thing?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we do. So, for example, in the trades, it's something that we do look at. However, systems are often very different depending on the country of origin. It's also our colleagues at immigration also look to things to before people come to Canada. Are there ways to facilitate them gathering the information that they'll need to get their credentials recognized, to be aware of the time that it takes, and processes that might be involved as well.
All right, and Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
30 seconds.
About 30 seconds. Okay, so I'll be very quick. Recently, the nursing school at the University of Saskatchewan signed a partnership with another university in the Philippines to standardize the curriculum so that as soon as the immigrant arrives in Canada, his or her credentials are recognized and the person can start working right away. Can you provide some insight as to how widespread these partnerships are and what we can do to have more of them?
So thanks very much for the question. That is, I can't speak to that particular example, but that is exactly what we're trying to do at a federal level. Look at some of these best practices, make sure that they work, and then replicate them more on a national level, and encourage other PTs to take on similar practices.
Thank you, Mr. Cram. We'll now move to Mr. Fillmore, normally for this third round of questioning for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a thanks to all of the officials for joining us here today as well. I wonder if there was, and Chair, forgive me, is it 5 minutes? How much time do I have?
Yes, 5 minutes. Okay.
I was wondering if we could just sort of go to each of you and ask you what you would like us to know. What is the message that you would like us to take away from you today that will help us in our deliberations as we work on this report? And we'll start. I'll just go across the row on the screen as I see it. So we'll start with Mr. Massey.
So thanks for the question. I think as part of the study, I think going into the recovery, it'll be making sure that Canadian businesses have the supports, I think the workforce and the capacity to succeed and be able to continue to advance or sort of grow and scale. And I think we need to pay particular attention as well to our sort of innovation companies that sort of drive the new job creation in the country.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bates?
So great question, thank you. I would just say, how do we best onboard everybody? Because I think this will require everybody's participation, whether it's colleges, whether it's employers, workers, and how do we convince them that this is in everybody's interest to make sure that we have a strong and resilient economy?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simard?
So I'm from the Marketplace Framework Policy Branch. So of course, I'm going to talk about the importance of not forgetting sound rules for the market, previsible, but also making sure that it's a level playing field so small businesses can compete on the merits and not be faced with abuse, for example, from large players. So as I said, the government is really committed in looking at this, but we've been following with interest the work that Indu's been doing in the sphere, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to come back and maybe give a bit more time to a question that my colleague Nathaniel Erskine-Smith asked, which was the quote, and Nate, I don't remember whose quote it was, but that's, in lean times, employers are expected to compete for the positions that are available. And what about employers when times are different and there aren't that many employees around? And I wonder, we are hearing about wage inflation. We're seeing, I'll give you an example here in Halifax. Most restaurants have gone from minimum wage up to $15, $16, even $20 an hour to pay restaurant staff. So we are seeing that. But is there an industry perspective on this, on an answer to that question that you have come across or that you're hearing in any of your work?
So I will say we are hearing from employers about the need to compete, including a wage and benefits, and also work arrangements as well. Like, I think a lot of people have sort of questioned their work arrangements. Some people can work from home. Some people in the service industry have to interact with clients, and that is more difficult sometimes, as some clients do not share the views of the business or the employer. So I think they being able to provide more supports to the employees, being able to accommodate different schedules, I think is important. And I think we are seeing an increase in wages in different sectors. I think it's a bit too early to have definitive views on the increases. From my perspective, at least the numbers that I've seen.
Okay, I'm just wondering, one perspective that MPs will hear from their constituents is that there could be a role for government there to help employers, especially small business SMEs, with some kind of helping to close the gap and help them compete. But I wonder if there is a message, from government that would be helpful to employers, to SMEs, to sort of to do what you just said, to sort of reconsider working arrangements. And I guess what I'm saying is a way to encourage employers to acknowledge the responsibility that they might have in helping to solve the problem and not merely leaving it to government.
I mean, thanks for that. I mean, I think it's important. I think just the market dynamics of competing for workforce are sort of bringing employers to realize that they need to provide more attractive pay packages, and by packages there could be many different ways. I think the government has a role in making sure that the marketplace is fair, and that's done through sort of the labor code federally and provincially. And we need to, I think the associations and trade associations have sort of made comments or sort of helping and providing supports and resources to their members to help them on sort of work to find talent to help them staff their businesses.
Okay. And if Chair, if I have just another 30 seconds.
Yeah, quickly, Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you. I just wonder, is there any discussion happening in your department here about having an immigration stream that would help Canada to meet its skilled trades shortage as we're trying to embark on addressing this housing shortage? Anything about trades?
So again, that would be a question best answered by RFCC. We do have a number of apprenticeship programs that we are looking to get youth more engaged in the trades, to look at marginalized, equity-deserving groups more engaged in the trades, because it is predominantly a white male-driven occupation, and we need to make sure that it diversifies so that we actually have the labor that we need to work in that field. And they're good quality jobs that we need to do more to support and encourage and create an environment where everybody can work in that industry.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bates, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here with us today. I'll suspend for a minute for our second panel to join, and thanks to all of you. Have a great rest of the afternoon. So I'll suspend for a minute. The MPs for their cooperation in resuming this meeting, and for our witnesses for their presence from the BDC. Thank you very much, Mr. Cléroux, Madame Kastner. Nous avons donc Monsieur Cléroux qui est vice
Mr. Cloutier is Vice President, Research and Chief Economist, and Madame Kashner, Vice President, Partnerships and Government Relations. We're very happy to have you with us. I think Mr. Cloutier will be speaking for 6 minutes. Thank you very much.
To be here. Inutile de présenter longuement.
We don't need to be introduced. You know us, so we have 75 years of experience and have even more visibility since the beginning of the pandemic. And we are a bank that works for entrepreneurs. We're a Crown Corporation that reports to Parliament through the Minister of International Trade, Promotion of Export, Small Business and Economic Development. We have activities of investment and loans with an arm's length relationship with the government, and we are a complement to private sector loan investors. We take more risks than other financial institutions. When the economy weakens, we intervene. During the pandemic, we were able to give $2.8 billion in direct financial support, as well as $4.5 billion indirectly in collaboration with financial institutions across the country. We also have venture capital as well as council.
My economic research team supports not only internal planning within BDC, but also our clients through regular publication of free reports and analysis to help them understand the economic context in which SMEs operate. Some key recent observations of relevance to this committee study, including based on a recent trip that I have made to meet entrepreneurs from coast to coast to discuss these current realities. Demand for products and services will remain strong for most businesses in Canada, which is an excellent news. In relation to the committee's interest on supply chains and inflation, supply chain disruptions continue to be a major challenge for Canadian businesses. In our latest BDC survey, 63% of SMEs reported experiencing longer delivery times, and 61% said they are facing price cost difficulties. Supply chains will continue to be disrupted for at least another 12 months. The situation is more difficult for those businesses that cannot really pass on cost increases to consumers. This is the situation, for example, for a client which I meet recently in the meat packaging industry. His input costs, meat and plastic, are increasing, but his clients, in this case big box retailers, are refusing price increases. So as a result, this mid-sized company's profits are down despite higher sales volume. Labor shortages also continue to be a key issue for many businesses. We recently released a labor shortage study that builds on similar work we did in 2018. Proportion of people in Canada aged 65 or more has increased from 13% in 2000 to 19% in 2021. Baby boomers are leaving the workplace, while the working age population is growing at a slower pace. From 2000 to 2012, the labor force increased by 12%, but it's only expected to grow by 3.8% in the current decade, or could be even less. 21% of Canadian workers are over 55 today, which means that about 4 million Canadians are going to retire in the next decade. In other words, labor shortages are here to stay, especially in light of expected demand for workers. Layered on top of these long-term trends, the pandemic amplified this issue. Without COVID, there would be 440,000 more people in Canada. Immigration declined by half because of COVID restrictions. Immigration levels should return to normal in 2022. Furthermore, 20% of workers who lost their job at the beginning of the pandemic changed fields of employment. As a result, the number of job vacancies more than doubled since 2015, with the gap particularly felt in accommodation and food services, as well as manufacturing. There are actions entrepreneurs can and do take. 37% have adopted flexible work arrangements, 35% are providing more internal training, and 26% are recruiting younger workers. Our advice is also that entrepreneurs should consider formal hiring processes, having a more competitive total compensation package, expansion of their hiring pool, and perhaps more importantly, given the long-term nature of these shortages, invest in technology and automation. Canadian businesses using automation are performing better and growing faster. Technology is now available in all sectors, including services and retail. In that context, I want to highlight that BDC is pleased to contribute our efforts to the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, which was launched last month. As part of Stream 2 of CDAP, Budget 2021 announced $2.6 billion for the Business Development Bank of Canada to help SMEs finance the implementation of their technology adoption plan. BDC will offer zero-interest loans to improve productivity, better serve consumers, and become more competitive. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this lays a frame for great discussion. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Cléroux.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cléroux. Mr. Deltel, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your presence here at the committee. I'm very pleased to hear what you have to say, even though we could say that it's concerning when you talk about labor shortages and when you talk about the fact that the production chain, the supply chain is an issue, and the entrepreneurs today, sometimes they may not be able to move ahead with the economic recovery. Earlier you said that you work in complementary fashion with the private sector. You're not a competitor. And when you look at the crisis that we've been through over the last few years, your bank, the Business Development Bank, you were able to help entrepreneurs despite the fact that there was a lot of effort that was put in with the by governments to help. Yes, we were able to give a greater volume of loans between 2020 and 2021 so that businesses could go through this difficult period that started in 2020. So private financing diminished in Canada, but public financing increased, and BDC was part of that increase. Question. So what were the results? Did the businesses, were they able to refund loans that they'd received? If so, in what proportion? Well, in terms of the BDC, I don't have the full proportion, but despite difficulties, despite the difficult period of 2020, the economy was able to recover well, and so for us, with our portfolios, the situation, I don't have the exact numbers, but the situation was very solid with respect to reimbursing loans. So if it would be possible for you to could give us, maybe not in the next hour, but if over the next week or so, if you could give us some precise data, that would be great. And also, if you could give us a breakdown region by region, type of business, the type of loans, the larger loans, the smaller loans, that would be able to give us a general portrait. We know that government has made $10,000 that didn't need to be reimbursed, and $30,000 that did. Did your institution get involved with that initiative? If so, what are the details? And what do you know how did that help businesses? And did the businesses, as far as you know, did they refund the money that was loaned to them from taxpayer money? Well, we were involved in the project, but I don't have any data with respect to reimbursing. But the studies that we've done, we've looked at in our studies at financing of businesses, and businesses that were given by the government did help, greatly helped to businesses to get through the period, especially through 2020. In your publicity, now I'm a federal member of parliament, and I look at your BDC publicity even more now, and and I'm looking at the economy, but you do a lot of publicity, and that's maybe not a fault. I come from media, and so I don't have a problem with people who buy publicity, but I must say that it's a lot. And I know that you're saying that you work in a complementary fashion with the private sector and that you're not a competitor, but the role that you have to play is it's difficult to really look at how you divide the two sector. But in your publicity, you put an emphasis on the fact that you look at inclusive projects where you respect today's realities. But can you tell us a little bit more about the evaluation that you do of a business when they come to you? And when you talk about new social realities today, when you're what you're promoting in your publicity, how does that look concretely? Answer: we have different programs for different types of entrepreneurs. So with respect to the risk grid, each application is evaluated on a separate basis, and we want to ensure that we respond to different clients. So we have different programs. We have programs for women entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs that come from minority groups also. So we have that way of breaking things down. There are no general criteria, but we have specific programs for different types of clientele. In the $2.8 billion that you invested in the indirect investments, what are the percentage for what these programs you just mentioned? I don't have an answer, but we can provide you with that information. As a question, if you don't have the precise answer, you can. We're not in court here, but you can provide information if you can. But what would be the percentage of success when it comes to refunding when you're looking at the different types of programs? That information can be provided for you. Is it within a regular range, or was there more difficulty? Well, I don't have the numbers with me, but I can tell you that there's not much difference between the different types of clientele. You have to understand that the BDC offers loan, but we also offer advice services. And so through experiences, our research has shown us that when you have both the advice and you have the financing, and when businesses get the good advice, this helps them ensure success. Thank you very much, Mr. Detil. That's all we have as time. Mr. Lapointe for 6 minutes. Lapointe. Thank you very much. I share my time with Mr. Nathaniel Erskine Smith.
The Parliament had the opportunity to reach out to many local organizations who were successful applicants for funding under the Canada Summer Jobs Program. But as my staff and I called organizations, and we called over 200 of them, we often heard from our local SMEs that while they were grateful for the funding to hire a summer intern, they were already struggling to find staffing. Many of them were reduced to, the owner and one other staff person, and they've been desperately trying to find employees for some time. So I want to know, what programs does BDC have available to help our SMEs find and hire the labor they need, especially in a post-pandemic economy?
Well, we really focus on the technology adoption. We believe that what businesses can do in this difficult period of time of finding people, one of the best strategy, according to our research, is to invest in technology and automation. So we look at the 1,500 companies across the country, and we look at their different strategies that they have been using to face this shortage of labor. And what we realize is the number one strategy, the strategy that has the most success, is to invest in technology and in automation. So we have different programs to help businesses to invest. First, to find the right technology. We don't sell technology, so we are independent. We can give some advice about which technology they can use, and also we finance the investment in technology. So we really believe that one of the best strategy for businesses is to invest in technology, and it will help them to do that.
So as we move further into our pandemic economic recovery, it's becoming more and more clear that we are never going back to the way things were. Some have benefited from this change and others have lost their livelihoods. So we need to provide our SMEs with the knowledge and resources to shift their businesses where they can be successful in our new reality. Now we know that there's a program that has been designed, the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, to help companies, or SMEs. I want to know, how is BDC helping SMEs through this program?
Well, we're helping SMEs in two ways. First, we are helping them to have a plan, a strategic plan to invest in digital technology. We have a loan with zero interest rate to help them to invest in the technology that they need to do it. So this is the two ways that we are helping SMEs. We're not the only one to provide support or advice in terms of their strategic planning, but we can do it, and we also provide financing.
Thanks very much. So BDC's mandate is to help businesses, specifically entrepreneurship, with special reference to small and medium enterprises. Could you give us a sense of the percentage of loans that BDC has with small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are floating rate? And with that number in mind, are you concerned about the impact of rising rates on SMEs and the negative impact on growth?
That's a question. I don't have the answer on the percentage of floating rate, and we can provide you that later. The impact of interest rate increase, we're not too concerned about it because in our research, we often ask questions about ability to repay or ability to have more debt. And this percentage of companies who are saying that they have the ability to have more debt has really improved over the last 12 months. So it was a difficult situation in 2020. 2021 was much better for most businesses. So their actually financing situation or their financial situation has really improved. Not, in some sectors it's more difficult, like accommodation and food services. It's a sector that is still struggling. But in most sectors of the economy, the financial situation has really improved. So the fact that interest rates are increasing, obviously is not a good news when you have a loan with a floating rate. But at the same time, we're not too concerned.
For the companies that do have loans, it obviously impacts the amount that they have to spend to service their loans. And if they have to spend more to service their loans, they've got less to invest in their businesses, which seems to me it might impact growth. But you aren't concerned about it at the moment.
Not according to the numbers we have. Like I said, the financial situation of businesses have really improved over the last 12 months.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Maintenant, Monsieur Le Maire pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Le Maire for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Cleroux. Thank you very much for being here today. I would also like to say hello to your President, Director General, who I was able to meet recently. Unfortunately, it was through Zoom, but it was very constructive nonetheless. I would like to hear what you can tell us. You were speaking in your introduction, and I'd like to hear more about the advantages of decentralizing decision-making, especially when it comes to strategic development fund like what you deal with. I'm not sure if I've understood the question. You're talking about with respect to decisions? Well, and the capacity to be able to adapt to the needs of each region. You have regional offices. They each have autonomy. You have mandate letters and objectives that are national objectives. But there still is a somewhat regional autonomy. So what are the advantages of that? Well, as you mentioned, the decisions for loans are made in each of the Canadian regions, and that depends, of course, on the structure of the whole bank as a whole. So that allows us to react very quickly within each of Canada's regions, and as I said in the introduction, we're able to react when there is a weakening of the economy, and that can happen in just one region for a given region. The fluctuation that could happen, say, for materials, that could have an impact in just one Canadian region. But that does allow us to be able to respond quickly to the needs of each region. I spoke to the Minister Joly last year or a couple of years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it's important, as you were saying, it's important that there's advice that comes with the loans. And I think that this is very important, and I would like to say that your work has been a great success. Recently, I participated in the Public Accounts Committee, and the Auditor General was criticizing the fact that there was a disparity in the use of funds based on regions. So for me, I think that's a strength, that each region has an interpretation and that it be based on their needs. So would you say the same thing at the BDC, that each region benefits from the capacity to adapt to what's needed in the territory? We look at the businesses across Canada, we look at the ones that have the greatest need. And so the needs in the economy varies. And the economy is quite diversified depending on the regions in Canada, and that allows us to react very quickly. For example, in 2014, we were able to move very quickly, and we set up a program specifically to help businesses in a given sector in Canada that allowed us to react very quickly to be able, in response to a precise event. Even if Canada is doing well, there are regions that aren't doing as well because of the problems with the oil sector, for example. And question. And I had a concern with respect to the role of the BDC when we look at the agricultural sector, and this applies also as a reality in the forest sector. But my impression is that businesses, we have a lot of demand, a lot of need in the region of the Témiscamingue, and so we're looking at processing where you have this is an important aspect of development, and it can have an impact in the whole business ecosystem in the region. I'm thinking, for example, of the creation of butchery services in Abiskamang. And so we had a project that was set up, but it's quite a challenge to do that and to finance it, especially when you're looking for funds from the federal government and through your funding. So do you think it would be important to be able to adjust these programs to be able to respond when we have labor shortages, to be able to help these businesses that are looking at processing issues and when they want to transform their businesses? We're not involved in the agricultural sectors, but we do get involved in second and third levels of manufacturing processing, or in the meat sector, for example. So I don't know the projects you're talking about specifically, but we are involved in processing. So you can see that my question is really a cry from the heart here, and when we want to be able to have you think about how you could increase the mandate so that you'll be able to include the agricultural sector where there's a great need in our region. And in Quebec, we propose a regionalization of the development programs so that it would be regional, so that these regional issues could be that funds could be based on the territorial need. And I think that's something that's absolutely fundamental. Would you be open to the idea of creating funds that would be available in the regions with local advice, but that we would be able to have decisions where we look at say in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, where we'd be able to look at where an abattoir would be able to get funding. I think that this could be for, I said, we don't make grants, but it's loans that we give people, and they're based on risk. So I think your question would be better made to the industry department where there are also programs, granting programs. In our case, we finance businesses, and these are businesses when they get a loan, it's for a project which has economic viability. But we are involved in all regions across Canada. So we work in partnership with different organizations in each region. And so, of course, you have to remember that it's not a question of grants, it's really just loans. Thank you very much, Mr. Cleroux. Mr. Mass, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. One of the things I've always been curious about is why the BDC does not have a credit card. Maybe you can provide some information on that. Especially small and medium-sized businesses, the amount of transaction fees and credit that they have to carry and the interest rate would make a robber baron blush. And this is one of the things I think that could really help small and medium-sized businesses because there's an absence of competition in that. And I'd like to hear why the BDC does not at least venture into this type of an operation with well-standard customers.
Actually, it was studied a long time ago, and the result of our analysis was that was not a product that will be very popular with our clients, and probably the reason is every single client of BDC is also a client of a bank because we don't offer operation. We offer loans and advice. So every client of BDC, it's actually a client of a financial institutions, often a major bank or credit union. But we did look at this option in the past, and I don't have the detail of the analysis that was done under a long time ago, but that was we have decided at that time that it was not worth pursuing, that the product was not very popular with our clientele.
Well, I can only imagine the lobbying of the bank industry about that, and I would ask that maybe perhaps it be revisited. I don't know of a store that I could go in now, especially small and medium-sized businesses, that feel comfortable with the rate that they have to pay for transaction fees and also the amount that they have to cover. During the start of the pandemic, I worked really hard to push, and some were better than others, to lower interest rates, but they're back up again for borrowing rates that have been historically low. Even with them going up a little bit right now, they're definitely out of line, and they're actually a windfall. So do you have any idea when that study was? And have you ever considered a line of credit as well? Those are, products that, the BDC historically has been known as the bank of last resort. It would seem to me that those two items are ones that are highly popular along small and medium-sized businesses that also do not enjoy competition right now amongst the banks. It's almost similar to the oil and gas industry with very few margin differences amongst them.
I don't have the detail of the analysis, but we can provide more detail about this in writing.
Okay. Would there be consideration? How would we go about actually even getting to the point of asking BDC customers that you've been doing business with whether or not if they would be surveyed? Or has there been anything related to that? Are you familiar with, and has the BDC been following some of the consumer rights and small business organizations with regards to their advocacy about credit card rates and interest fees? Is that part of your normal operations, is to listen to those organizations and consult with them? I'm glad that you toured the country to hear from entrepreneurs, but do you also listen to the third-party advocates from the associations like the Small Independent Business Association?
Yes, we definitely meet regularly with Chamber of Commerce and CFIB, and but like I said, I'm not fully aware of this research that was done, so we'll make sure that we provide some more detail in writing.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, maybe we can itemize some of these things, because I know that at times we don't always get a response. I'm not suggesting that you would do that, but it's just that we just had a panel before with a number of different ones, and this is one that I'd really like to appreciate to hear some science behind it. And while I have you, with regards to two items that were noted is that were different, was the Women Technology Venture Fund and the Black Innovation Fund. How are those performing in a general sense? I know I'm running close to my time, but how are those two items, the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund, Venture Fund, and the Black Innovation Fund, how are they performing so far?
I don't have the detail. Maybe my colleague Karen will have more detail. Otherwise, we can provide you more information later.
Hi, thank you. The Black Innovation Fund was just launched, so we don't have any performance data quite yet. As you know, it is an investment fund, so there's going to be a period of investment and then kind of a period of harvesting, and we're still in the period of investment. As I believe you're referring to the Women in Tech Fund.
Yes. Venture fund, yes. Thank you.
The venture fund. That one is, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. We could definitely get that for you, but there's been a tremendous amount of interest. We've done a number of investments, and again, that has that kind of traditional investment and harvesting horizon. So it's not like a loan where you could see performance over a shorter period of time. We will have to wait a period of time to see how the fund as a whole performs, but we could certainly get you the data on number of investments made and the value of those.
And even application process would be important, because sometimes I've met with you different representatives at different times, and sometimes we don't always get the programs at different times, or they get lost with some things. So those are just two things of interest I'd love to share with constituents. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses.
Merci, Monsieur Moss. Je passe.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. We'll now go ahead with the second round of questions. Bernard Généreux, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cleroux, you said that you spent $2.8 billion in loans, and there was a $4.5 billion. Was that in loan guarantees, I would imagine? Yes. Yes, those are guarantees for financial institution loans to ensure that we would be able to help the most SMEs as possible. We did have direct loans, but also indirectly through the financial institutions. So that would mean I'm in business for 30 years, and I never, unfortunately, would have had any help from the BDC, but the reason that I never went to you, I always thought that you were there for big business. And so is this change of orientation, did it happen recently? And now that you're now closer to SMEs? Well, you're quite right. Most of our clients are now small and medium businesses in different sectors. 30% of manufacturing. The businesses have between 50 and 100 employees. So yes, most of the businesses are small to medium. And what are the minimum loans that you can give? 100,000, and so you can get a loan of 100,000. And I know that at Canada, you work within the community, but there are conditions that are often associated with a moratorium, for example, on interest or interest rates that are very low for the first years. Is that the same thing that you do? Well, we have different forms of financing, so there can be all types of arrangements, but the principle is to always have a financing that really corresponds to the risk. So depending on the business, and the cost of the loan will either be higher or lower. And so that's why we say that we're a complement to financial institutions, because a business that has great financial health, they can get private financing. They won't be coming to us because we'll be charging higher rates, because we do charge for the risks. Because you don't take guarantees? You have a higher interest rate, or do you have guarantees? We do have guarantees in some cases, and less generally than financial institutions on the private sector. But we have more flexibility for loans, and we're looking for businesses that have more risky projects. But a lot of our work is done with financial institutions. The 2.8 during the pandemic, is that all loans without any interest? I don't think so. I don't know if maybe Karen.
I don't think it was.
They were
without
low interest, but there was interest. And there was also, as we typically do, a holiday on the principal repayment for the first year.
Comme DEC Canada.
So like Hadec Canada. Mr. Clairaut, you talk about the new program that was announced recently for technology and access to technology. So what do you consider new technology at the BDC? Well, it's quite broad, the definition that we have. I don't have the definition before me, but it really is quite extensive. We want to help businesses to be able to adopt new technology. It could be quite simple, setting up an internet site, for example, where they can have transactions, or something more complex, automation, for example, of some type of manufacturing process. Mr. Lemieux asked you a question earlier with respect to regionalization of your institution. I would imagine, I'm wondering, at Rimouski, do you have a branch there? Yes, that's quite right. Because, and I'm referring to what Mr. Deltesse, he said you do a lot of publicity, but I would imagine that Madame Dibon is maybe brought some freshness to you. You're much more present than in the past. And I follow the economics, but the regionalization of the BDC, I'd like the statistics that you have. Could you produce statistics on the amounts of loans that were given by region in Canada, or at least within Quebec, so that we could have that information? That would be very interesting for us to have that, because I don't think the BDC is as present in terms of loans as with ours in terms of publicity. So yes, you do have to be known as an institution, so you need the publicity, but at least maybe, because I never had to do with your services, but I don't have the impression that you are as present within the Quebec regions. I might be wrong, but that's the impression that I have, that the BDC is always more oriented towards the larger businesses. Answer: well, we'll be able to provide this information to you, but I can tell you that we are very present in the regions as compared to large cities. Thank you, Mr. We've started to hear the bells. There's going to be a vote, so I think we could finish the second round. That would maybe give us 10 minutes with the second, and then we'd be able to adjourn so that we could go ahead with the vote. Do I see consent for everybody? I think everybody's in agreement, and there's no insurrection, so we can have that. So I will now give the floor to Mr. Dong for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank the witnesses, like my colleagues. Appreciate your presence here. On BDC, I read in the briefing note prepared by the analyst. In 2020, there were in 2021 there were 72,000 new business owners that got included in your client total client amount. Just out of curiosity, how many clients do you have? What's the number of your clients right now? Do you know?
Right now, it's 75,000.
Okay, so that's okay, pretty good. And all of that 75,000, what's the percentage for small, medium-sized enterprises?
I would say it's 99%.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Or small and SMEs.
And I understand there was some new program introduced to help business during COVID. And do you have any numbers to share with the committee on default rates prior to the pandemic and after the pandemic, or during the pandemic?
I don't have the detail on that, so we can provide you some more detail later.
Okay, please do. We've been here and hearing that in Canada there is brain drain as a problem. Talent after they come up with their own IP, they tend to move to South due to lack of access to capital. And I know that BDC has a role to play in providing capital to small-sized businesses and keep them here. What would you have the floor, what would you like to say to people who are thinking about moving their operation to the States because lack of access to capital?
I think in general, there's not that many who are moving to the state. There's many companies who are opening an operation in the state because it's often easier for a Canadian company to do business in the United States if you have a place of business. So we see that a lot. I would say that we see that much more than businesses who are moving their entire operation to the state. Also, what we see is we often make reference that U.S. companies buying companies in Canada, but actually every year we have more Canadian entrepreneurs buying operation in the U.S. than the opposite. Canadian entrepreneurs have been very dynamic, and they are, to expand their business, they often make an acquisition south of the border. So that's, I would say, one of the best secret is our entrepreneurs are very active and they are very dynamic, and they buy companies outside.
I hope there's some stats to back that up, because the reason why I'm asking this question is I met with a company who currently hires about 50 people. It's a software management company that helps to maximize the productivity for solar panels and whatnot. It's in downtown Toronto, and they're contemplating moving out of states because lack of they can't get financial support here. So I mean, access to capital.
We can provide you a study that we did, and you will see the numbers of business acquisition between the two countries.
Thank you. There's one small confusion here. I see under the co-lending program, which offers up to $12.5 million to SMEs, the financing split is 80-20 between BDC and private sectors, and which ends December 2021. And there is another similar program under BCAP, which ends same day, December 2021, provided by EDC. Is there like overlap of programs, or they're just serving different type of clients?
Karen, do you want to take this one? I think you have more knowledge than I do on this one.
I believe that the amounts were different.
One's 12 point something million, one's 6 point something million dollars. Okay.
Yeah.
But for clients who's qualified for one, are they qualified for the other automatically?
Not automatically.
But again, apply.
I believe so.
Okay, that's good to know. And I sit down with a lot of young entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas, but looking for like a small amount of startup fund. What's your general policy or attitude towards startups, especially in the tech field?
And that's a very open-ended question, but we'll have to have a brief answer, Mr. Cléroux, please.
Okay, we have a venture capital fund, which is one of the largest in the country, and we help a lot of new entrepreneurs with creative ideas. So it's through our venture capital fund.
Much.
Thank you, Monsieur Lemire, 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Cléroux,
Mr. Cléroux, I'm looking at your study from September 2021, how you adapt to labor shortages and difficulties of hiring. And you mention a difficulty that have reached important heights, but you look at different solutions. I would like to hear what recommendations would you be making to be able to deal with labor shortage issue. For us in the report that you're talking about, the main solution is investment in technology and automation. And we also refer to the fact that businesses need to look at different ways of looking at the labor market. It's 5.4% of unemployment, but for young people it's more than double that. And it's higher for people that have disabilities, of course. So we do try to encourage businesses to look differently at the labor market. And there are a lot of many competent people who may have difficulty finding a job given certain characteristics that they have. So we do encourage people to have a better hiring process, especially for small businesses. Sometimes people in small businesses, they work through their networks, but there's people are looking for a talent. Everyone's looking for talent, so you really have to sell your business, sell yourself as an employer. So these are different strategies. There's strategies that are needed by SMEs. Question: you made different studies in 2008 saying that labor shortage was really a difficult problem, and in 2019 you said the labor shortage is going to stop investment. But what's changed since 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic, and what can we expect with the economic recovery over the next 2 years? Unfortunately, the shortage is going to be a problem. 20% of the people on the labor market are more than 55. So unfortunately, this issue is an issue of an aging population, and that's why we like to get businesses to think that this is an issue that's not going to disappear in a few months. If you think it's going to disappear in a few months, you're not going to be looking at long-term measures. So you really have to look ahead, and so you have to look at what's going to be the best for your business. It's going to be different depending on your sector, your style, and your capacity to invest in technology, for example. So this issue is not going to go away, and we do put a lot of effort into this, making SMEs aware of this, that they're going to need to continue to grow in a context where, unfortunately, the working population is going to be less and less. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cleroux, and Mr. Mass, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, is there a particular sector that has been harmed even further? I imagine tourism might be up there, but maybe there's another that's going to require a different level of service to recover, or is it all going to be boilerplate? This is what you kind of can expect from the BDC, or is there going to be a couple sectors that have been hammered hard that might get a little bit more of attention and perhaps some better leverage?
Well, the highest level of job vacancy is in tech industry, not because the industry is not performing well, it's just because there's a very strong demand. The sector has been growing very rapidly. Manufacturing is looking for people in some region. People can hire thousands of people in manufacturing because this is a growing sector. And like you mentioned, it's a very difficult problem for food services and accommodation, but this time for a different reason. At the beginning of the pandemic, this 20% of workers who lost their job in food services and accommodation who moved to another sector because they had opportunities somewhere else. But as a result, as the economy is improving in the tourist industry, well, it's very difficult for them to recruit. So the problem is the same everywhere, but sometimes for different reasons. Some sectors are just growing. Some other sectors, they were penalized because people decided to move to work somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses.
Alors, merci, Monsieur Mass. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Mass. Thank you to our witnesses for the second panel. Thank you for your clear answers. I think this will help our study on competition in Canada. So thank you very much. Thank you to the clerk. Thank you to the interpreters and to the technical people and the analysis. So we have now adjourned.